Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to part 2 of the Indian inspired embroidery Japanese rice bag. That's a bit of a mouthful. So I've gone ahead and finished 3 of the panels like I talked about last week, plus the base. And I decided once I'd done all the stitching and they were just, you know, the top cotton cloth that I did the embroidery on with the backing cloth. Well, I did the embroidery through 2 layers of cotton basically, but it wasn't very structural. I thought with all the stitching it might be structural enough, but then I decided it needed a bit more. So I had some, I'm down to my, these are literally the last of it. This is quilter's wadding or batting. It's a blend. It's what I used to use years ago when I was doing free motion machine quilting. You could use, you see it's very thin, it's almost like felt. So you could use felt if you had it, or thin woolly blanket, or interfacing or something like that. You can layer stuff up, so if you've got some cotton flannel you could put several layers of cotton flannel together and maybe just do some tacking stitches, you know, just big tacking stitches through to hold the layers, just, you know, whatever you've got. So I've gone ahead and put a piece of that in every one, and all I did to sort of quilt it together, I don't know if you can see, is I stitched the invisible base around the edge of the elephant. Can you see that? It's cream on cream, so and then I turned the edge over and did the invisible base around the edge, and I'll do that with you on the blue one to show you. So those are all ready to go, 3 sides and the base. The base I didn't go around the elephant, I think I just went around the edge because it's the base and, you know, I'll have things on it. You could, if you felt the need, you could of course have done this cantha stitching. If I planned in advance I could have done it through the layers. I actually prefer the stitching without the wadding these days. I just like the stitch definition better, but you know, that's personal choice. Do you see you get those little ripples when you do this cantha inspired stitching in the cloth because it's soft, so it can do the ripply thing, whereas with the wadding it's just a different texture. Stop wittering, Catherine. Make a little experimental piece of each, you know, just the cloth and the wadding. Do a few little lines of running stitch on it and see which you like best, would be my advice. So here's Mrs. Blue. So I've done all the beads on her except for on her little crown here. Sewing on beads, you know, it's sewing on beads is sewing on beads, isn't it? I don't use that invisible thread or anything like that. You know, you can get that nylon invisible thread. I just use a neutral thread. Make sure that your needle is fine enough to go through the eye of your beads. It is handy to know which end is the lid, this end. These are actually my friend's beads. I need to give them back there. I just tip a few in the lid and then put that safely over there, because those all over the floor would not be fun. And so I've just got my thread coming through, you know. Now I want the bead to lay in this little space, and I want it to lay on its side, so the thread goes through the hole here and then out of the hole the other side and down, so it lays. So you need to sort of bear in mind that you need where your thread comes out to be where you want the whole of that bead to lay, and then you go through your bead. So just pick a bead up with the needle. Some beads sometimes are slightly smaller inside and they won't go over your needle. Get it away and put it in the bin. Don't put it back in the pot, because you will keep picking it up. Even if there's 5,000 million beads in there, you'll keep picking up the one with the too small hole. So that's now on my thread down by my cloth, so I sort of audition where it lays. It's very tiny and hard to see. And then if you go in exactly into the cloth where you're coming out of the hole in the bead, if that makes sense, then your bead should then lay nice and flat against the cloth. And I always then go round again, and I'm a poet and I know it. So I do 2 stitches, so I come out again, go through the eye of the bead and back down. It's just one for luck. And then if you really, really are afraid of them coming off, you can then go to the back and take a little back stitch. Fred hair. Just behind the bead. before you then come up for the next one. So then that can help if one bead gets snagged and pulled off, you don't lose all of them. But you know, it just depends how much care you want to take really. So come up again, pick up a bead, and then go down sort of the length of the bead away from where you came out. I hope that makes sense. It's very hard to see, I know it's so teeny tiny. So that your bead lays nice and flat on its side, and then come back up behind it again, go through again, and back down. I'm not bothering with the back stitch on the back because, you know, I like to live on the edge. So I just need to put 2 more on here, I think, 2 or 3 more. So you can either push the bead right down to the base, you know, so it's laying on the cloth, and then make your stitch, or you can just make your stitch, and as you pull the stitch through, the bead will go, you know. Just be careful that your thread doesn't twist as you go through. You want it to lay nice and flat. If it twists, then it throws your bead out of whack. And I've also seen people, I'll show you with the next one, come up again, and I sometimes do it if I'm feeling lazy, but I do think it can twist them if you really want to be persnickety. So you go in for your first stitch, and then I come out again for the second stitch, and then instead of going through the bead, pulling through and then going down, you could go through the bead and then down and in as well. It's not really lazy, it's just slightly quicker, you know. For me, as always, I'm going to squeeze 1 more in there. It's not really a space, but I don't really like even numbers of things. And there's 4, so I'd rather there was 5. You know, it's about the action of stitching and what I like to do rather than speed. But you know, you do you as always. Right, so I will do it that way, just for speed in this instance, because there's quite a lot to get through in this video. And that's how I sew beads on. And then I'll go to the back and I'll take 3 back stitches at least, just to be really sure that end of that thread is anchored. And use a good quality sewing cotton. You know, this isn't the time for your vintage threads that might be a bit snappy. This is a vintage thread, but it's sturdy. So there we go. So that's that. So I'll put these away and put the lid on, because Fred and those would not mix, although he's not in at the moment, but you know. So there we go. So I've got that. So all the embroidery is done. For this outline stitching, all I did was I started next to the elephant. I started here by her tail actually, and just stitched around following the contour, and then around and around. And when I came to the embroidery, I stopped and stitched back, and I just kept going till I filled the space. And I just think it sets her off, and it's still a plain background, but it's got a bit of texture to it. So I've got my bit of wadding / batting, which I've cut, not very square by the look of it. Is that 7.5? Let me measure it against the other one. It looks decidedly wonky. It might just be my eyes. Oh, it is square. It's just my eyes apparently. So I'm just going to lay that on the back and sort of centralise it. And then something's wobbling again, I don't know. I'm still setting up here. I still feel like I'm setting up. Then I'm going to turn it towards me. I'm going to fold over this edge first, and we've got that drawn line, if you remember. So that drawn line here needs to be right on the very edge of the wadding. Do you see? So it's sitting on the edge, because there's a thickness to it. You don't want it on the front or on the back, but on the edge. And I'm just going to put some pins. Let's try those slightly bigger applique pins. I think for this through the wadding they might be just the job. I just check the edges actually before I pin. Just check that the corners also line up, and I'm just going to go to that side again and pin that. I'm not doing the corners yet, I'll do the corners in a minute. So for this length, 3 pins is enough. More than I'm just being careful, by the way, not to pin through the embroidery. I'm just coming through where there's only, you know, plain cloth. So then I go to the opposite side. I'll make sure it's somewhat centralised. And pin that, again making sure that drawn line is on the edge. And really the important thing is that the 2 layers are, you know, meeting nicely, not that it's not pulling in, or, you know, by the time it's all made into a bag and it's got stuff in it and it's got the drawstring and all that, it's going to be all crumpled anyway. So then I'll do the corners, and I'll do those like little kind of envelope corners. So right, to do the corners, I'm just going to do like a little envelope. So I'm going to bring the corner over the point. Am I in frame? No. Stop creeping away, Catherine. Like that. And then get my thumbnail under there and fold that in. You know what an envelope corner is, don't you? How we used to make beds, kind of, before we had fitted sheets. I expect some of us do still do envelope corners on beds, or hospital corners they also used to call it. Do you see? So you get a nice neat corner, and then I will put a little pin, but I'll put it through from this side just to hold that together. So I'll do that with all 4 corners, and I'll pin the 2 opposite sides as well. So I'll do the 4 corners first, and then I'll pin the opposite sides, and then I'll come back and oh no, sorry, rewind. I shall finish the pinning. I shall invisible baste around the edge of the elephant, being careful. Well, I'll go just outside the chain stitch. So the invisible baste, I'm sure you know if you've been here a while, is a tiny back stitch on the front and a bigger stitch on the back, and that's just to hold the 2 layers together. And on the front you won't see it. If you go right up against your embroidery and use a neutral 1 strand of, you know, a normal sewing cotton or 1 strand of embroidery floss, you won't see it at all. And then I'll do the same thing around the edge, making sure that I go through, you know, on the back. You can see on there because it's darker. So there's the bigger stitches on this side and the little tiny dots on the front. Do you see? So, and then when that's done, I'll be ready to start putting that together. So I'll set that to one side for now, and I'll show you the next bits. So the other bits I've got are the lining. So I cut 5 squares, which are 8.5 inches. So I've got 2 half-inch seam allowances. So it will finish at 7.5 inches. And I've drawn myself 7.5 inch squares. I didn't want to put you through watching me with the pencil and ruler again after last week. But if you made that cardboard template that I recommended, and you didn't throw it away like I also recommended, you can obviously then use that to draw around onto your lining fabric, leaving yourself a seam allowance of around 1/2 inch. I always use 1/2 inch for bags. It's just, you know, because it's structural rather than 1/4 inch, you know, it's just what I do. So one of these pieces is the base, and the other 4 are the sides, and it's too big to all fit in. But can you get the idea or the impression that I've laid them out in a kind of X? Let's just... So this is the middle one. You're a bit low in. I wanted you low in for the stitching, and now you can't see. And then I've laid one there and one there, and then one there and one there, up at the top. Up there, up there. So it's an X. You understand what I mean? So it's like a bag that's exploded. So this is exactly the same as the original rice bag tutorial, the constructing the lining. So what you do then is you sew each of the sides to the base first, and then you come back and do the sides. So I will pick up the base and one of the sides. I'll show you here so you haven't got to go and watch that whole other video as well if you don't want to, and you haven't already. So the base and one of the sides, and I've got them right sides together, so my drawn lines are on the outside. Do you see? And then with my pins, I'll go through this corner where the 2 drawn lines meet with a pin in a straight line, and then through the corner of the other one, coming out the other side, and I'll leave that pin hanging. You could of course just put them together and start sewing through the corner and, you know, see how it turns out. I'm just showing you my now famous obsessive pinning that comes out when I start making rice bags, or piecing sometimes. So through that corner with the pin, and then come out on the opposite corner, on the corner of the other one. And then I leave those pins straight through like that. You see I've got them between my thumb and forefinger. And then if there's any discrepancy in your measuring or anything, you can kind of ease that in as you pin along the side there. So I start in the middle, do the same thing again, I put my pin through and just check, yes, I've come out on the drawn line, that's okay. I can pin that, and then I'll go between there and the corner, that's probably enough for this. Again, I'll go through straight with the pin. Am I on the drawn line? Yes. If I wasn't, I would just adjust, you know, one or the other of the pieces. And then I can pinch this between my fingers, get that pin out, and then put it back in. Don't turn the pin when it's through straight in the corners, because it will shift. And the corners need to match, need in inverted commas. So we need another pin in between there. Go through straight first, check you're on the line, yes I am. And then hold this so those 2 points are lined up, and then put that pin back in. So I would then sew that side, and I'm going to use my grey sewing thread, and I'm going to, because this is silk and it's a bit shifty, I'm going to do 1 step forward, 2 steps, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, which means I'm going to do 2 running stitches. Well, let me start it. I'll start it. Where's my needle? I'm going to get a new bit of cotton because that's too short to be bothering with. It's a stitch that I've used before when we've done piecing of things, when we're going to cut them, and like if you did the disappearing 9 patch or the checkerboard where we sewed strips together and then cut them. It's also known as a locking back stitch, but I call it 2 steps forward, 1 step back, just to be different. So I've got myself a lazy girl length of thread, and I'll make a knot, but I'm also going to do back stitches to start. Pick it up. Now don't sew from the end, because you won't be able to join your sides together. You only sew on the drawn lines. So I'm going to just go through there, right in that corner where the 2 drawn lines meet, and then I'm going to do a back stitch, maybe 2. Now, and I'm going to take 2 running stitches, 1, 2, and then I'm going to go back sort of halfway that space between where I'm coming out and the end of the previous stitch. I hope you can see. So I'm going to go back behind my stitch, and then I'm going to take 2 more running stitches. So you take 1 step back, or half a step back actually, and 2 steps forward. And when you get into the rhythm of it, it's really nice for any kind of, you know, any piecing that you're doing. So 1 step back, 2 steps forward. And I'll do that all the way along to the other end. And I'll do a back stitch at the end, and then I won't break my thread. I shall pick up the next piece, the next side, and do the same obsessive pinning. And work my needle through. I'll do it actually and show you. You know, who cares if this video ends up 2 hours long. But I'm doing the smallest running stitches I can, just for strength. You could, of course, if you had a sewing machine and you wanted to go and do this on the sewing machine, it's not cheating, you know, it's just what you like. Don't feel like sewing machines are cheating. I'm going to make blinds and things when I get round to it for my home. I'm definitely going to be doing that on the sewing machine. Maybe not the one that I'm planning to do for the house top, the piecing part of it, but all the construction sewing, I'm going to do that on the sewing machine. I don't think there's any harm in using a sewing machine. How many times am I going to say? For certain aspects, you know, if I happen to like hand piecing and hand stitching and so on, but I don't really fancy doing 4 blinds I have to make, you know, that are 1.5 meters by whatever their size they are. I don't really fancy doing all that hemming by hand. I've got other things I'd rather be stitching, so you feel free. I sometimes see people being apologetic in the Facebook group, for example. They say, oh, I'm sorry I did the lining by machine. No need to apologise. So I'm nearly to the corner. But that little 1 stitch back just makes it a little bit sturdier. And I think once you get into the rhythm of it, well, it's certainly as quick as running stitch because you're making the same movements. It's just as you go in, you're going back instead of forward. When you remember, I nearly forgot then. Oh, don't get a knot in your thread. Come on. This is lovely, this pink silk. It was just a small bit. Again, it came from my friend. It's really beautiful. It's beautiful to stitch as well. It's not that badly behaved. Right, so now I'm to the end. I'm going to do a back stitch. I'm just going to park my needle there for a minute in that seam that I just took. So that is one side here in my hand, and then that's the base. So the next side is over here to my left here. So I need to attach that onto there, right sides together. So turn it round. So now I need this point here where the 2 drawn lines are, put a pin through, the same, but then it needs to be in that corner there. Do you see where I just stitched? So I put a pin through, make sure it comes out in the right place. So the only thing is here, you just have to ignore this bit that's flapping around here that you've already stitched on. And then go and pin the other corner. It's exactly the same as before now. And pin in the middle. On the line now, I'm slightly below the line, so I need the back piece to go down ever so slightly. That's it. There are some people that say they make their bag lining slightly, ever so slightly smaller, because otherwise they go a bit foofy. That's a word. Floofy inside, you know, a bit puffy. If you want to do that, feel free. The only thing I would say is slightly smaller is really, you know, like sort of 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch at the most. But then bear in mind that when you come to join the lining to the bag around the top, your lining is going to have to stretch slightly to fit. The other thing I suppose you could do is when you do your side seams, come out slightly at the top, you know, take slightly less seam at the top. I don't know if I'm overthinking it, but otherwise, you know, if your lining's way smaller than your bag, you won't get it to fit. Don't need that. So just bear that in mind if you think. I never bother. I think they settle down, you know, eventually over time, quite quickly actually. Right, where's my needle? There it is. So now my needle's coming out there. So all I'm going to do now is just sneak through that corner, and then can you see? You get out the way, and then sneak through that corner so that I come out on the front on my drawn corner there. Snug it up, make sure it's not snagged around anywhere, and then I do another little back stitch here. So I'll do a forward stitch first just to get myself going, then I'll do another little back stitch, and then away I go. So I'll do that around all 4 sides, and then I'll come back when I've done that and show you going up the side. It's exactly the same principle, only then you've got, you know, 3 bits of cloth meeting because you're in a corner. So I'll go and do that, and I'll go and join that bit of wadding to my last embroidery. And then the final thing you'll need, come here, out of the way, are some little, well no, it's not the final thing, you'll need a drawstring, but that'll come later. The other thing you'll need are 4 little loops for the corners. So here are my little loops. So I've sort of gone along with my theme of the 4 colours, and I've stitched up the edges of the seams and in the green, red and yellow, and the 4th one I'll do in blue. So I've had some of the silk, just enough to make 4 pieces. Now these pieces are as big as the silk allowed them to be, but I will tell you the exact measurement. So they're at 3 1/4 inches wide, slightly less, by 4 5/8 long. So that's 3 1/4 by 4 1/2, let's call it. Because then I'm going to pin them together, right sides together, if they've got a right side. I can't remember what seam allowance I took, let me just have a look. Talk amongst yourselves. I took a generous 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to stitch up the sides, apparently a generous 1/4 inch, as long as you're consistent on all of them so they all end up the same width. And if you wanted to draw a line, obviously you can. Oops, got 2 pins. So just up the 2 sides, not the ends. And again with the same piece in cotton. So I just stitched up the 2 sides, and then when I'd done that I turned them right side out and finger pressed the seams, and then I'll show you on the red because it shows up the best. And then I just did a running stitch about 3/16 or so from the edge, with it flat, you know, it's not through, it's still open, along each edge. That's just decorative really, and it just makes the seam sit nice and flat. It's kind of mimics top stitching. If you are used to doing bag making and things on a sewing machine, you know, you'll often top stitch a seam, won't you, to make it nice and flat. And then when I'd done that, I just stitched the loop together with a bit of a running stitch along the bottom. It just means it's easier to handle later when we get round to attaching it to the bag. So I'll go away and do that as well. So I've got lots of homework, and that one I'll do with the blue floss. And so then once I've got the lining stitched together, apart from the last side, I'll come back and show you how to deal with that corner, and my 4th loop made, and my other bit of embroidery invisible basted to my wadding, and then I'll come back and we'll put it all together. Okay, so no time at all for you, probably a couple of hours for me. See you in a little while. Okay, so I've sewn up 3 of my sides and I've left the 4th side to show you. Try not to wave it around in your face so it goes blurry. So the only thing really that's well, there's 2 little things that are different. One is this end where it's meeting the base. You shouldn't have to pin because it's already joined, you know, it should be in the right place. But you do want to make sure that the bottom piece of cloth, the base of the lining, is pulled out like that. Do you see? Pulled right up out, pinched up out of the way there, out of that corner, so that when you start stitching here to go up the side, you don't trap that. So that's the first thing to think about. So you don't need to pin there because that's already in place, like I said. So I'm going to go and pin the other end in the same way on the corner. So that's exactly the same as before. Those look completely off, those seams, but they're not that off, I just apparently cut them wrong. The advantage of these drawn lines is the seam allowances being different doesn't matter, you know, otherwise you'd match the seam allowances and the raw edges, and then you'd be off because you've got the drawn lines. As long as you stitch on the lines, the seam allowance can vary, don't matter. Don't know why I said that in a funny accent. It's probably because now I live in the West Country and I'm picking up the twang. Slightly down, that's better. So there we go. So the only thing, like I said then, in this corner is when I go in with my, there's my piecing needle, there it is. When I go in there, I really want to make sure that is pinched up out of the way. Otherwise you'll get a little pucker in the bottom corner of your bag. So I go right in on that corner, do a back stitch, and then away I go again. 2 steps forward, one step back. I had to stop talking because the clock chiming. And the only other difference is when I've stitched along there, when I come here where I've been stopping, I'm not going to stop, I'm going to stitch all the way up to the end. I'll just show you on the others. Do you see here? Do you see? So I've just stitched all the way up to the top, because then when that sits inside the bag, that's all joined then, and then we can turn it in like that and then join that to the bag, and that's, you know, otherwise it would gape. It just makes it neater. So once that's done, the lining's finished. What I didn't say, if you want to put pockets, and I didn't want to have pockets, it would make more sense to do that before you sewed the lining pieces together. So you get one of your lining squares, you make your pocket, you could either just get a bit of cloth and, you know, double turn around the edge and stitch it on, or you could do it in the same way as the tabs, only stitch on 3 sides and in a bit leave a gap, turn it out, you know, and then top stitch, and then stitch that on however you wanted to make a pocket. But then if you position those on your lining, remembering your seam allowances before you sew the lining together. So that, when I've stitched that seam, is all ready to go in the bag when the bag's done, so I'll set that to one side. I just wanted to show you this because I talked about this tab, but I didn't show you, and you may not all, you know, have done this kind of thing before. So I've sewn a seam up each side, like I said. So I just turn it inside out. I did a good knot and a back stitch on each end, because I need to, you know, pull it a bit, not that much, but a bit. It's a biggish thing, it's easy enough to turn. And then I just want to press that. I'm just going to do it with my thumbnail. Press that seam. I'm just pushing it right up against the stitching line, running my thumbnail along it, and I'm going to just roll it so that it's flat. Do you see? So the seam's nice and flat, and you can't see the backing on the front, and vice versa. And I'll just put some pins in there just to hold it. You could of course go and iron it if you wanted to. But finger pressing in this instance is adequate. It's not only that I'm lazy, and also I find if you're pressing with an iron little things like this, if you press it slightly wrong, you know, if you press a crease in and the seam's slightly off, you can't move it anymore, or it's much harder, and finger pressing is more forgiving. It's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. No, it's true. So I just press that with my thumbnails and just pinch it, put the pins in. So that was what I meant about, you know, turning and pressing and so on. So then when I've done that, when I've pinned it, I'll get I had 2 strands of my blue. I'm going to use my blue floss because it's the only colour I haven't used yet. And then just do a line of, you know, neatish decorative running stitches up each side. I don't think I need to show you that, do I? So I'll do a line of running stitches up that side and a line of running stitches up that side, and then when I've done that I'll fold it in half that way, match the raw edges together, and then I just put a little line of running stitches through that edge. I'll show you on this one. About 1/4 inch in, tacking stitches basically, but they'll stay there. It just means that when you come to attach it to the bag, you'll be holding this and the bag and the lining, and it's just one less thing flapping about to worry about. I think it's worth the extra time. So that's ready to have the blue stitching. The other thing I just want to show you now is how we're going to put the bag together. So here's my outers, the outer of the bag. So little baby girl elephant is going on the bottom. So I'll put it right side down. Now I've got my 4 colours, which again I'm not going to be able to fit in. Obviously I want them to be the right way up as they walk around the bag and not walking on their heads. But I also need to think about which one I want next to which one. So I'm going to put these right side. I suppose I could put that right sides up as well. I mean, that one's going to go, you know, its own way because it's flat and not round the sides. So if I put them like that, yes, I think then I've got the two warm colours opposite and the two cool colours opposite. So they'll be walking around that way. So that's how I'm going to sew them. So I'm going to do this in exactly the same way, make this cross shape that you can't really see, but you can imagine. You know, I've got red, gold, green is here and blue is here. But I'm going to join them as if I was English paper piecing. So I need the bottom edge of this panel needs to be joined to one of the edges of the base. So I'm just going to match the corners. Hope they match. Good job it stretches. And then I'm going to whip stitch, and I can put those away for a minute. And I've got some, it's vintage floss, it's Anchor, but it's modern vintage. Well, it was second hand, but it's, you know, it's not old because it's structural. So you could use pearl cotton if that's what you like to use, or whatever. I've got 2 strands, but I would use something a bit beefier than just normal sewing cotton. The feet, see, I nearly sewed the wrong side. The feet need to be attached to the base. So I'm just going to anchor my, I've done a knot already, my thread somewhere behind there, and do a back stitch as well. Now, English paper piecing is commonly with the hexagons. If you've been following the Monday project, we did look at English paper piecing. But it's basically a whip stitch. So I've got them wrong sides together, so my stitching will be on the good side. I'm going to come right out just about a 1/16 of an inch, a little bite of the cloth, and then I'm going to stitch into, I hope you can see, into the right side of the corresponding spot on the other one. And I'm taking a bite of the 2 cloths and a tiny weeny bit of the wadding as well. You know, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, there's 2 layers of cotton cloth there. And I'm going to space my stitches about that far apart. And I'm not going to mind if they're a bit wonky. You could, of course, use contrasting thread. I've gone for a neutral because I want the elephants to be the star. And you could, of course, also put pins, or if you have those handy little clips that you like to use, I just match it up. I just check every now and then where I'm at. Do you see my base is slightly bigger than my side panel? So I know I have to ease some of the base in. So I'm just going to gently push the base up a bit. And that's how I deal with things being wonky. Back to wonky for Wednesday. So I'm going to take a few more stitches and then I'll look again and I'll adjust. I just don't like having pins for doing this. So I'll do that with all 4, checking and double checking that I've got them on the right way up and in the right order. You see it's puckery there, but it'll all, you know, it'll all be all right in the end. Just check again. It's not that bad, you see. And so I'll join all 4 sides to the base, making that cross shape. You know, starting new thread when I run out, which I'll do just by hiding my knot on the inside. And when I've joined the 4th one, I'll turn it and go up the side. And when I've done 3 of the sides, I'll come back and show you the 4th side, so then you get the idea of the sides. But it's pretty straightforward, even if you haven't done English paper piecing. And then we can put the lining in the bag and the tabs and do the drawstring. So I'm going to go away and do that. You can see that is going to be quite a job. That is probably going to be this evening's entertainment because it's just chimed 6. Did it chime 6? I think so. Stella's not yet hassling me for her tea. She had quite a long walk today, so she's having a snooze on the sofa. But I bet the minute I go into the kitchen, oops, she'll be there. Anyway, I've now got a knot in my thread. I'll go and sort my knot out. So I'll go away and do that, and I'll come back and I'll show you the side, and then we can finally put the whole thing together. It's been a long project, but I've really enjoyed it, but I am keen now to see it finish. You know, when you get to that stage. I started it back in August, I think, sitting in my friend's garden in the sun, embroidering the elephants, and now it's October, nearly the middle of October. Is it? No, it's not the middle. Anyway, it's October. Stop wittering, Catherine. I'll go away and do my homework, and it'll probably be tomorrow when I come back. Today for me is Monday, because I knew it was going to take me probably a couple of days of filming and stopping and doing. But you'll see this on Wednesday. And I'm wittering again, because I'm tired, and when I'm tired I witter. I'll just edit all this out. See you in a minute. Okay, I'm back. I've put the camera a little bit higher in the hope that you can see. So I've stitched all the 4 pieces to the base, and then I've stitched up the sides, 3 of the sides. I've also put the loops on, but I'll talk about that in a minute. I've left one to show you. So just the last side. So all you do once you've got your cross shape is you just fold them wrong sides together in exactly the same way, matching the corner. You can put pins or clips like I said before, and then you just whip stitch up there. It's just exactly the same, only you know you've got more bulk. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to bury my knot. I've also, sorry, my hands are all all day I've been thinking it's Monday, and I've just realised it's Tuesday, which means tomorrow is Wednesday. I don't know why I've been all day thinking it was Monday, but you know, sometimes that happens, doesn't it? So I need to get this done. It's already gone 6 in the evening. Just fed Stella. Need to get this all ready for you for tomorrow. So I'm just going to stitch along the side, and again I'm not pinning or anything, but if you want to you can. I'm just going to stitch a bit and then have a look and see how it's matching up and so forth. Now just in the corner you might have to take an extra stitch or 2, you know, just to pull that corner in nice and neatly, and it might be a little bit harder to get through. I'll just pull that stitch up, that's good enough. So I'm just taking little bites. If you find it hard to get through, depending on what kind of wadding or what kind of cloth or whatever, you can go through one layer and then the next layer. It's easier than trying to go through both layers at once. Hope you see what I mean. I've put you so far up. So I've got my finger in between, I go through the back layer and then the front layer, and then again I'm being careful not to go through my embroidery. I just found it easier. My hands are a bit, you know, some of you may know, I've been taking the wardrobes out in my bedroom. If you watch Park Home Life you will have seen them, dark wooden things all along one wall. Well, they've now gone. And today I had to go to the DIY store to get some coving, and because there is coving all around, you know, the stuff you put between the wall and the ceiling. I'm only saying that because in other countries it might be called something else. So they'd put it in front of the wardrobe, so the wardrobes had obviously been there before the coving. They'd also plasterboarded the room after the wardrobes were there. So there's a little step in the wall from where they've plasterboarded, or drywalled, I think you call that in other places. Sorry, I'm supposed to be doing a rice bag embroidery video and I'm telling you about DIY. So anyway, so I had to go and get some trim to, you know, I've done the best I can. It's a bit of a visible mend, let's call it. Let's call it that. That makes it sound okay, rather than a bodge job. So I've been doing all that today. Like I said, thinking it was Monday. And I had all the time in the world to finish Wonky Wednesday's video. And suddenly realising it was Tuesday. So I'm just going to do little bites. And every inch or so and I'm on target, do you see? So I'm just going to finish stitching up that side, and then I'll come back and show you about the loops, because I've done them slightly differently to how I did it in the original rice bag video. just because there's no definitive way with me. It changes every time I do it. Because I either think, oh, I wonder what if I did it like that, would that be, how would that be? Or I think it's an improvement and I try it, and sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. So yeah, so I'll finish that, and then I'll come back and I'll show you putting the loop, and then we can put the lining in and do the drawstrings and bish bash bosh. It'll be job done. Bish bash bosh. It's taken months and months and months. So I'll be back in a mo. Okay, so I'm just coming up to the top here, and you see where I folded the corners in, the envelope corners. They're not as pointy as they could be. So I'm just going to kind of rectify that, if you like, if you want to put it that way, with how I stitch. So I'm just going to make sure that I get a stitch right through the very end, and then kind of look at it out flat. And you see if I hold it out flat now, there's a little V in there. And I can sort that out also when I attach the lining, but I can also just get a stitch now through there. I hope you can see. Can you see? Through there, and then back through there where I came out. And just pull that in. That's alright now, it's still a tiny step, but that'll go. So now I'm going to go through to the back, just to end my thread off. With a little back stitch. I'm just going to go down a bit lower so I'm sure it's hidden when I put the lining in. What is it, Stells? What is it? You need to go out? I just let her out before I sat down to film, and she looked at me like, I don't need to go out, why are you letting me out? And now she's whining. I'll see if she carries on, or maybe she's just heard something. So the tabs, I'm stitching them first to the outside of the bag. So then when I come to stitch the lining in, they'll get stitched on the inside. So it's still quite big under here. And because I did one of each colour on the running stitch, I've just matched the colour of the running stitch to the elephant. So I've got the blue one left and the blue elephant left. So I found the middle just by folding the panel in half, like that. Hope you can see. You know what I mean by find the middle. And I'll just get a little pin and pin it somewhere in the middle, just like that to mark it. And then I get my little loop, and that's the top of the loop there obviously, and fold that in half. And then I just match the fold of that to the pin. And I can't remember now how much I had them sticking out. Excuse me while I measure. 1.5 inches. And then I just hold my ruler on, sorry it's probably glary, and just get them 1.5 inches, or thereabouts, you know. You can be as precise as you want. You can also, what I do sometimes is not even measure them, it's just match them up to the previous ones just to make sure they're all the same. So it doesn't really matter as long as there's room for your 2 cords to go through. Oh, I've got a pin sitting there. Do you really want to go out, Stells? Let's get this pin in. Excuse me one moment, I shall just go and let Stella out, then I'll be back. Go on then. Okay, she did need a wee. So, where was I? Yes, the loop. So now I've got my needle and thread. I'm still using the 2 strands of the neutral floss, and then I'm going to pinch that and get that pin away. And I'm going to bury my knot somewhere under there, being careful not to let anything shift. And I'm only through the top layer of the loop, I'm not going right through to the other side. And then I'm just going to do the same little whip stitch. Again, only staying, sorry, in the middle of the frame, only staying in the top layer of the loop. So I've got my finger behind. It'd be quite hard to go right through because it's quite thick. Whoops. Come on, hands work. Okay, I've got it. Just all the way along to the other side of the loop. So I'll do that, and then I'll show you putting the lining in will be the next thing. I've got right to the very end of the loop, so I'll just pull through for the last stitch. Now I'm just going to shoot straight through to the back, but I'm going to angle my needle towards the inside of the bag without stabbing myself, hopefully. Oh, Stells, you've just been out now. Because I need to finish off my thread, but I don't want that to happen where it might show above the lining. I'm still a bit high up, do you see, where I've come out, so I'm just going to go back in and just go down a bit further, just so where I hide it is sure to be hidden, if you see what I mean. I'll just do a couple of back stitches, and then I'll show you what I've done to the lining, because I did more than I said I was going to do. Don't know why, it just felt like it. It's something I sometimes do. So anyway, so that's the outer of the bag all done. All you can see is a load of wadding. They're a bit flippy floppy, but they'll be fine when the lining's sewn in. So here's the lining. And this is the inside of it. So I joined it all, you know, like I told you. This is the, you know, the good side. This will be inside the bag. And then I turned the top seam over against the drawn line and did a running stitch about 1/4 of an inch down, because this is going to get whip stitched to the back. So you don't want, if you do this, you don't want the running stitch too close to the edge, because you need room to do the whip stitches. And then I got completely carried away and I ended up stitching running stitches up and down every seam, just because I just love how it looks, and this silk was just such a joy to stitch. I just wanted to stitch on and on. So if I show you on this side, you see the seams are pressed open and they're absolutely fine because I did the locking back stitch, so they're perfectly secure. And I just did a running stitch down every seam, and the corners I just folded them, you know, tuck them under. So that's optional extra if you feel like it. So I think I'm just going to have a look. It's quite a big bag. Can you see what I'm doing, or am I still up in your face? I can't go any higher, that's the problem, with my stand. I think it's okay if I sort of angle it a bit. So I've got one of the side seams of the lining, and I'm just going to match that to one of the side seams of the outer. And I sit the lining just ever so slightly down inside. Now I know I'm not going to be able to pin through that bulky corner, so I'm going to move along a bit here and just pin there. And it doesn't matter if I don't go right through to the front of the bag, as long as I go into the, you know, into the outer. So there's one pin there. So then I go around to the next side seam and get the side seam of the lining and do the same thing again. Match the two seams, tuck in any stray tails, make sure you're just, it's kind of not even 1/8 of an inch really, just down inside, so that the lining doesn't show on the outside. No, that didn't get trapped there. That wadding, shoddy workmanship. And again, just put a pin. And the third one, and you've guessed it, the fourth one. I really hope you can see something, if you need to. Probably it's, you know, the words are enough, you don't need to see, but it would be nice, since it is a video, you could see what I'm doing. And then when I've done that, I've got 4 pins in it, then I'll go back to the side, make sure the tab is tucked in, and then just see how I am for size. If I need to do any easement, just give it a tug, and I think it's going to lay pretty flat, so then I'll just go to the middle somewhere. And I'm just looking, actually I'm going to pin first either side of the tab. I think that's the best thing. Again, with just a shade down inside, with the lining just a shade down inside the outer. I'm just checking as well that, yeah, you see there's no, it fits well enough. And then I could put a pin in there as well, why not? So I shall go round and pin that, all 4 sides the same, and I'll come back and start the stitching with you. Okay, so I've put you up even higher. The only trouble is I now have to lean right over because as I put you up, it pulls you further back. So I've got my lining all pinned in. I'll try and stay in frame. Oops. Still the same 2 strands of floss. If you want to, you know, do different stitching everywhere, then of course you can. I'm just doing it for consistency. So I'll start somewhere here. It doesn't really matter where you start, but I want to just show you this. I mean, it's not anything different really, but I don't. Oh, and I'll stay over here. I have to lean right over. So again, I'm just going to go right down underneath, only through the top layer. It's a great big loopy knot, but stuff it in there. Nobody will ever know. Do a back stitch as well, just to be sure, and then just come in through the lining. See, now I've folded it and done the running stitch. I haven't got to mess about folding it, and I've just got that one lot of pins that was quite easy to put in. So then I just take a little bite through only the top layer of the outer. Got my finger behind again to make sure I don't go all the way through, and then just come forward about 1/8 of an inch or so and just take a little whip stitch, overcast stitch, whatever you want to call it, you know, a little stitch, a little stitchy stitch. Just little bites, but always keeping my finger behind. Again, it's quite thick there, so it will be quite hard to go right through. You're annoying. And then when I come to the loop now, it's already stitched on to the outside of the bag. Put that pin away. Check I'm still in frame. So I'm coming now to the loop. So it's just exactly the same really, only I'm going to come into the backing and then come through onto the lining where it's over the loop. And then again I'm just taking the front of the loop, not right through, but you know, you'd really have to force it to get it to go right through, I think. And just keep whip stitching along. So I'm going to do that all the way around. If I need to get new thread, I'll just bury my knot in between the layers, and then I'll come back when I've done that and show you the drawstring and the beady things I'm going to put on, and then we'll have a finished bag. So I'll be back in a mo. Okay, I have finished attaching the lining. So I'll just give you a quick scan. There's Mrs. Gold. Oh, and the other thing is, I did not plan this, I have to be honest, but because of the chevron border, look at that, when you join them together, they make these little diamond patterns. I'd love to say I planned that, but I didn't. But anyway, it just kind of brings the panels together in a way, you know, they carry on. There's linkage between them. Mrs. Green, Mrs. Red and Mrs. Blue, and the little baby on the bottom. It's the biggest rice bag I've ever made, I think. Is it bigger than the bento? Oh, it's maybe the same size as the bento. Here's the bento. Oh no, it's bigger. No, it is bigger. A good inch bigger. So I think it's definitely the biggest one I've ever made. And the lining, you see, is a bit foofy, but can you see? It's all nicely attached around the top. I've pushed it right down into the corners. I just love that silk lining. I just think that is a touch of luxury. So now it needs the rice bag closure. Now you could use some ribbon or some trim, or you know, a bit of lace or just string or anything. You need it to be as long as your 4 sides plus a bit extra to tie knots and so on. So my sides are 7.5, so that's 30 inches. 4 times 7.5 is 30. I, of course, being me, I'm going to do cloth twine. Just put the bag away. I did one already, and I used this sari silk ribbon that was around a gift that a lady brought me to our exhibition recently, and with it I put this grey cotton just because it was the only pieces I had long enough. I've got 2 videos on how to make cloth twine. There's a very short one that just shows me sitting in a chair making it, both right and left-handed. Thank you, takes a bow. I'm not ambidextrous, only when twining. And then there's another longer video which talks about which cloths to choose and how to join strips together and all that. You know, I'll put a link below. Now this is, I do it this way. I've done it this way for years. I like doing it this way because all I need is 2 strips of cloth on my own 2 hands. Now, I am lucky in that my hands, normally, when I haven't been DIYing, are quite nimble still. If you have hand issues of any kind, Marion, on Marion's World, has a video. She does it differently to me, which requires gadgets and gizmos. She uses her tailor's ham. I don't think you have to have a tailor's ham. I think you could use the arm of your couch or something. And I think she uses water and other stuff. Anyway, and 2 hands to twine is the principle, so that might be easier if you've got hand issues. I'll just show you really quickly. I'll just finish this piece. I've just got a few inches left to go. But I can do this without looking, walking around, you know. And I just like to be able to just do it with my 2 hands. It's just, you know. But if you can't master it, or if it makes your hands cramp, it is worth it. Even if you can master it and you find your hands cramping, every now and then I just, do you see, I'm just doing that, and I'm not pinching too tightly or holding on too tightly. And I'm going, this is actual speed. You see I'm talking? It's not speeded up, but I'm quite quick at it. I would like to know how many miles I've made in my life. But for me, this is the easiest way to do it. But you do you, as always. And nearly to the end. So I tied a loose knot to start with because I've got some bells and some beads, some brass bells and some brass beads. To put on the ends, but I'm going to first of all put loose knots and thread it through before doing the bells and beads. So that's the end. I'm going to cut off that one that's longer. Go back in the scraps. So I'm going to I'm not going to pull the knot up tight in case I want to undo it again. I'm just going to, you know, so it doesn't unravel. So the principle is that you start in one corner with one string and you go all the way around the bag back to that corner, and then the other string you start in the diagonal opposite corner and go all the way around. So you have 2 tails on one corner and the other 2 tails of the other string on the opposite diagonal corner. I shall show you. So just start anywhere. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes you need a pokey tool. Depends how big the loops are, and you know. The second one is usually more challenging than the first. You now won't be able to hear me while the clock chimes. Okay, I do think I need to adjust that chime. It is quite loud now. you know, if you can't do it with your finger, you could get a chopstick or you know, the blunt end of a pencil or something. So my bag was 30 inches, so that if you make twine, sorry, I should have finished saying that. If you make twine, the act of twining it will shorten the thread. So you need to make an allowance for that as well. So they started off, I think, somewhere around 40 inches, so a third longer. And I've got this much left, which is just about right. Can you see that? So I've got that one going that way. I think maybe at one point I need to invest in a tripod so I can film sometimes from the side like Marion does for bigger projects like this. So I'll just get my other one that I made earlier. And I forgot to put a knot in. So I go to the opposite corner. So these are coming out of this corner, so I'm going to the diagonally opposite corner. Do you see? And then I'll start there. And I'm just sort of making sure it sits on top of the one that's already in there. I've got this handy gizmo, which is actually what I use to adjust my camera stand. So I use that. It's an Allen key type thing. Obviously don't pull it right the way through, otherwise you'll just be threading round and round forever. So because I've got these quite loose knots, I can kind of get my Allen key, you know, chopstick, pencil, whatever, into the knot and push it through. And then make sure you don't push the other one out while you're about it. I'll show you. I don't know if you can't see them already. Can you see them? I think you can already see them because you're so high up. You're seeing much more of my desk than normal. And then, now that that surprise is spoilt, I'll tell you about this Friday's Park Home Life. I always feel that I need to make the brackets with my hands, but I can't when I'm busy doing this. There we go. There we go. So then you get hold of them, those two and those two, and you pull, and straight out of the box it closes nicely. That's what I just love. Well, there's many things I love about rice bags, but they just do, you know, they just behave themselves. They just close. So I've got 2 brass beads and 2 bells in this bag that I can't open, which came from a friend, and I think they came from India. So jingle jingle, nearly Christmas. It's not really nearly Christmas. It's not even Halloween yet, so it's nowhere near Christmas. So they've got quite big holes in. So I'm feeling I might put a bell and a bead on each end, you know, a bead on one end, and a bell on the other. So I'm going to undo this loose knot. Now, if I'm lucky, I can get both bits of, I'm going to twine that a bit more. I can get both bits of fabric through the hole in the bead or the bell. If I'm not so lucky, then I have to do it differently. I hope I'm going to be lucky. We'll see. Now the other thing you can do is, now I'm near the end there, the cotton is quite... Just throwing the snippies on the floor. Excuse me while I pick them up. What you could do, this is already quite thin. I don't think that's going to give me trouble. This is quite thick. I'm going to just shave it under a diagonal like that, so it makes a point. Do you see? And then carry on with my twining. A little bit more. That's fair enough, I think. And then just twist it. Sometimes this works. And then you can wet it a bit, you know, with hygienic water that you got from the tap. Or lick your fingers if you're more primitive. And then let's see if we can do it. I might cut that hairy bit off. hopefully follow. Now once it's in there, if you carry on twisting the same way that you were twisting before, as you push it through, it usually helps. Yes, we've got it. So then I push it up to where the twine starts. So I've got a bit of a tail. Actually, I'll push it a bit past. And then I'll make a little knot. And this time I'll pull the knot up tightly. And then I'll pull the bead back down and check the knot's big enough to hold it. There we go. Doesn't that look cute? So I'm going to do that on the other side. But first of all, I'm going to put a bell on this side. The bell is more of a challenge because it's not got a hole through. It's got a, you know, a little, well, it has got a hole through, but you know, it's a, one of those. I can't think what to call it. A loop. So I might, I'm just wondering if I just thread the grey through. Just auditioning. Yeah, I think I'll do that. So I've just threaded the grey through and I'll pull it up, push it up till it's against where the twine starts. And then I'm just going to tie the two ends together. I think that is the cutest thing to do. And you could then, if you wanted to, go and put a stitch in that as well. How can I get away with a double knot? But I think, yeah, I think a double knot is a bit fragile. That's sorry, silk, so I don't want to pull it too hard. There we go. So there we go. So you know, you don't need to watch me do the other two. Same as. So there is my, I'm going to stand up because I can't see. There is my Indian embroidery Japanese rice bag. I shall do it up with its bow. I'm going to try and photograph it, which is never easy photographing three-dimensional things. But I hope you liked it. I hope you're inspired to have a go at something similar, bearing in mind, you know, just be warned, it's very, very time consuming. It's taken me months, but I'm absolutely thrilled with it. And it is actually a gift for somebody very special. I won't say who in case she's watching. So I hope she's happy with it as well. Actually, I love that gold and grey together for the twine. So, Park Home Life on Friday will be a tour of the exhibition and a little walk up a hill, and it'll be an update on what I've been doing to my home, trashing it, but also there's a theme that is kind of emerged that I want to talk about, so I'm going to talk about that on Fridays in Park Home Life, the theme, and it will probably, what I'm thinking is that same theme will then carry on over into the Monday project for the Slowstitch project on the Monday. So I hope you join me for Park Home Life, and if not, you know, on Monday I'll obviously fill you in if you haven't watched Park Home Life. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.